Some people spend their whole lives waiting for the right moment to begin. They wait for more money, more time, more confidence, more certainty. But the truth is, the people who build something real don't wait for perfect conditions. They just get up every single day and they do the work. This is a story about a man who got up at 4 a.m. for 2 years straight, not because someone told him to, but because he had something worth building. It is also a love story, but not the kind that falls from the sky, the kind that grows slowly, quietly, between two people who both understand what it means to earn something. This is The Bread Between Us. The Bread Between Us, a story about love, flour, and the things worth fighting for. The alarm went off at 4 a.m. Daniel Reyes didn't groan. He didn't hit snooze. He sat up in the dark, the way he always did, quietly, deliberately, and placed both feet flat on the cold floor before standing. That was his ritual. Both feet, full contact. A small reminder that he was still here, still going, still choosing this. He pulled on his work clothes in the dark, a plain white t-shirt, grey trousers, the old apron he'd fold and tuck under his arm before walking out the door. His apartment was small, 1 bedroom, 1 window that faced a brick wall, a kitchen that doubled as his test lab on the weekends. He didn't mind the size. He'd grown up in smaller. By 4:47, he was on the bus. By 5:15, he was at the back entrance of Maison Leroux, one of the most respected artisan bakeries in the city, sliding his key into the door that smelled like yesterday's sourdough and tomorrow's possibility. He was not the head baker. He was not even the second. He was the prep baker, the one who came before the light, who measured and mixed and set the doughs to proof so that when the head baker, Chef Armand, arrived at 7, everything was ready. Daniel had held this position for 2 years. He didn't complain. He watched. He learned. He practiced what he learned on the weekends in his small kitchen, filling notebooks with observations, adjustments, failures. He was building towards something. He just wasn't sure yet what it looked like. Sofia Andrade came into Maison Leroux on a Tuesday morning in October. She wasn't a regular. Daniel would have remembered her if she was. She stood near the front counter with the quiet confidence of someone who knew what they wanted but wasn't in a hurry to say it. Studying the display case, the way a person reads a book they've been looking forward to. Dark eyes, ink-stained fingers, a canvas bag hanging off one shoulder. She ordered the walnut loaf, a black coffee, and asked the front cashier, Priya, if the bread was made fresh that morning. Priya said yes. Sofia said, "Tell the baker it's good." Priya smiled. "I'll pass it along." She didn't, because Priya was busy and the morning rush was starting. But Daniel happened to be restocking the display case from the back, and you heard every word through the half-open door. He stood there a moment longer than necessary, holding a tray of almond croissants, feeling something warm settle in his chest. She came back Thursday. This time, she ordered a pain de campagne and a small pot of honey. She sat by the window and opened a notebook, the spiral-bound kind with a laminated cover, and wrote steadily for 40 minutes without looking up. When she left, she tucked her chair in. Daniel noticed that too. He started keeping different hours at the front counter. Not often, just sometimes, when restocking coincided with a reasonable window of opportunity. He told himself this was coincidence. He was not a particularly good liar, even to himself. They met properly 3 weeks later. Sofia had come in during a quiet afternoon lull, when the cases were half empty and the afternoon light was coming through the window at a long angle. Daniel was wiping down the back counter, visible through the service window, when she asked Priya if she could compliment the person who made the seeded rye. "That one's Daniel," Priya said, and turned to call him over before he could retreat. He came out slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth, aware that he had flour on his forearm and probably on his face. "I've been eating your bread for 3 weeks," Sofia said, directly and without preamble. "The rye is the best thing I've had in this city. I wanted to say that to an actual person." He looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them looked away particularly fast. "It's not my recipe," he said. "It's Chef Armand's. You made it this morning, though." "Yes." "Then you deserve part of the credit." He almost said, "That's not really how it works in a bakery," but he stopped himself, because that wasn't the point she was making. She was being generous. He accepted it. "Thank you," he said. "I'm glad it was good." She nodded, picked up her bag and left. He stood at the counter for a moment after the door closed. Then he went back to work. They didn't become anything quickly. That wasn't either of their natures. She kept coming in. He kept being there. They spoke in the spaces, short exchanges at first, then longer ones. She was a freelance writer, he learned. She covered food, culture, small businesses. She'd been working on a piece about artisan bakeries in the city, which explained the notebook, the careful looking, the ink-stained fingers. "Is that why you kept coming back?" he asked one morning, when enough time had passed that the question felt natural. "At first," she said. Then it was the bread." He smiled. "And now?" She looked at him steadily. "I'm still deciding." He decided he respected that answer. The piece she was writing hit a wall in November. She mentioned it on a slow Wednesday, sitting at her usual spot by the window, staring at her notebook without writing. He had brought her coffee without being asked. They were at that stage now, and she told him, not dramatically, just as a fact. The editor wanted something more personal, more emotionally specific, and she wasn't sure she had that yet. "What does emotionally specific mean?" he asked, sitting across from her for the first time. It was a slow afternoon. Chef Armand was away at a supplier meeting. It means they don't just want information about bread. They want to know why bread matters to a real person, not in a general way, in a specific, true way. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My father made bread." She looked up. Not professionally. He worked in a factory, but on Sundays, before church, he made bread. It was the only time I saw him be patient. Everything else in his life was rushing: work, money, worry. But with bread, he slowed down. He said, the dough would know if you were in a hurry. He said it would punish you for it. Daniel looked at the table. When he died, I didn't know what to do with that. I went to work in a bakery. I think I was looking for something he left behind in the bread somewhere. Sofia had stopped writing. She was just listening. "Did you find it?" she asked. He thought about it honestly. "Some days." She wrote the piece. It ran in a national publication 6 weeks later. His father's Sunday bread was in the 3rd paragraph. He read it 3 times. He didn't tell her how much it meant to him. He just left a note at the counter for her that said, "You got it right." She kept the note. December came, and with it, the thing Daniel had been quietly working toward for 2 years. A commercial space had opened 2 blocks from Maison Leroux. Small, narrow, with a good oven and a back room large enough for proofing racks. The rent was steep. His savings were real but thin. He'd been writing a business plan in the same notebook style he used for recipes. Careful, detailed, revised over many drafts. He didn't tell Sofia about it at first. Not because he was hiding it, but because he wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. Saying something out loud made it real, and real things could fail. But she found out the way people who pay attention always eventually find out. She saw the notebook. Not intentionally, he'd left it on the counter between them during one of their afternoon conversations, and she'd glanced down at a page that said projected monthly flour cost and estimated opening inventory. She didn't say anything immediately. She looked at the page, then at him, then back at the page. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. 2 years, he said. Give or take. "Your own bakery?" "A small one." She was quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet, thoughtful quiet. He'd learned the difference. "What's the gap?" she said finally. He told her. The number wasn't huge, but it was real. The rent deposit, the initial equipment repair, the inventory for the first 2 months before revenue stabilized. He'd covered most of it. There was still a portion that sat between him and opening day like a quiet wall. She nodded slowly. "Okay." "Okay what?" "Okay, I understand the situation." She picked up her coffee. "What are you going to do?" "Keep working, save more, maybe apply for a small business grant. There's one through the city council for food and culture businesses. I've been drafting the application." "Can I read it?" He looked at her. "Why?" "Because I write for a living, and grant language is a specific skill, and you've been doing this alone for 2 years. She said it plainly, without pity, which was exactly why he didn't refuse. He said yes. She rewrote his grant application over 3 evenings. Not because his was bad, it wasn't. But she had a way of finding the sentence inside a paragraph that actually carried the weight and pulling it to the front. She understood how to tell a story. He understood bread. Between them, they made something that was better than either would have alone. He submitted it in January. He got the grant in March. Not the full amount, 60%. But 60% combined with what he'd saved was enough. He called her when the letter arrived. He was sitting in his small apartment with a brick wall view, voice steady, which took effort. "It came through," he said. She was quiet for a second. Then, "Daniel, 60%. That's enough?" "That's enough." She exhaled slowly. He heard it clearly. He understood it completely. He opened the bakery in May. He called it Domingo, Sunday in Spanish, after his father's bread ritual. The space was exactly as he'd imagined it, which was both satisfying and strange. White walls, open shelving, a chalkboard menu, the smell of sourdough starter that had been living in a jar on his counter for 14 months, fed every morning, kept alive through the long planning. He'd brought it with him, the way you bring something that matters. Sofia wrote the opening piece. Not for the big publication this time, for a smaller food journal, the kind read by people who actually cared about where their bread came from. She came in the day before opening and spent 3 hours talking to him, watching him work, taking no photographs but writing constantly. She described the starter. She described his hands. She described the way he checked the oven temperature with the same expression other people reserved for reading important letters. The piece ran the morning of the opening. By 9, there was a line outside. He didn't panic. He had prepped for this. He worked the way he always worked, methodically, fully present, both feet flat on the floor. That evening, after the last customer left and the display cases were empty and the door was locked, he sat on the back step of Domingo with a cup of tea and said nothing for a long time. Sofia sat beside him. She had stayed the whole day, not hovering, not interfering, just present in the way that grounded people are present. She'd helped Priya, who he'd hired as his front of house, manage the queue at noon. She'd refilled his water without asking. At 3, she'd put a sandwich in front of him and stood there until he ate it. Now they sat together in the early dark, shoulders almost touching, listening to the city settle. "You did it," she said. "We opened," he said. "That's the start, not the end." "I know." She looked at him. "But today was the day you decided it was real." He thought about that. He thought about the 4 a.m. alarms and the notebooks and the flour on his arms and his father's patient hands in a small kitchen on Sunday mornings and the grant application and the starter he'd kept alive for over a year just in case. "Yes," he said, "today was that day." They stayed on the step, until it was properly night. Neither of them was in a hurry. Neither of them needed to be. When they finally stood to leave, she took his hand, naturally, without ceremony, the way you do something you've been thinking about for a long time. He held it with the same care he gave to everything that mattered. They walked out into the evening together. The city was quiet and lit, and indifferent to individual stories, the way cities always are. But some stories don't need the city to notice. Some stories only need the people inside them to know what they've built and why, and who stood beside them while they were building it. Daniel Reyes locked the door of Domingo. He had somewhere to be in the morning. He would be there at 4 a.m., both feet flat on the floor, ready. Only now, for the first time in a long time, the day felt like it was beginning rather than just continuing. That was enough. That was more than enough. The end. And that's where we leave Daniel and Sofia. Not at the end of their journey, but at the beginning of something real. I think that's the most honest kind of happily ever after. Not the moment where everything is perfect, but the moment where you look at what you've built, who you've become, and who's standing beside you, and you think, yes, this was worth it. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who's in the middle of building something right now. Someone who needs to hear that the slow, quiet kind of progress is still progress. And if you're new here, welcome. Every week, I bring you stories like this one. Stories about real people, real love, and the values that make life worth living. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next story.